Hello, everybody. It's great to be here one more time today. My name is Gary Fowler. I'm the CEO, president, and founder of GSD, Get You Done Venture Studios, a premier AI and quantum venture studio located in the heart of Silicon Valley. I'm a 17-time serial entrepreneur with several unicorns under the belt. I was on the original management team at Click Software, which was sold to Salesforce for $1.35 billion, and also Eva.ai, an AI HR tech company that I co-founded with Dr. David Yang. We believe at GSD that intellectual capacity is evenly spread around the world, but opportunities are not. And today I'd like to welcome you to GSD Presents Top Global Startups, where we sit down with the builders, operators, and visionaries shaping the future of technology and business. For over 4 decades, I've had the privilege of helping companies scale from early innovation to global impact. But today, generative AI and agentic AI are moving out of the experimentation and into the core of how enterprise operates. But as these systems gain autonomy, the real differentiator is no longer just capability, it's trust. So today I'm excited to be joined by Chris Corrado, the CEO of Americas at Squirro, a leading generative and agentic AI SaaS platform built for enterprise decision intelligence. He brings over 35 years worth of global leadership experience, including serving as a group COO and CIO at the London Stock Exchange, CTO at eBay, and executive roles at Morgan Stanley, Deutsche Bank, Merrill Lynch, and AT&T Wireless. He's not just talking about AI in theory, he's deploying it inside some of the most regulated, complex organizations in the world. Today, we're going to go into unpack what it actually takes to build trust in AI at enterprise scale across data governance, autonomy, and human decision-making. So with that, I'd like to bring Chris onto the show. Hi, Chris.
Hey, Gary. Thanks a lot for inviting me. Delighted to be here today.
Yeah, no, it's great to have you. You know, Chris, by the way, my large language models, I call her Neen. So I have 14 as a team. She's always continuously sensing, listening, and she's actually coming up with questions for you because she said she's excited. So some of these are right from her, right?
Got it.
So she says, you've led technology transformation institutions where failure isn't an option. Financial markets, telecom, global commerce. From your perspective, why has trust become the central issue in enterprise generative AI and agentic AI right now?
Yeah, look, you have to look at the definition of trust as it pertains to what we're doing today. There's really 4 components to it. You've got to have traceability and explainability of what it is that you're doing and the answers that you're getting. The system has to be robust. That's been going on for 40 years now. The conclusions that you reach have to be fair. And of course, the platform has to be secure. So this is something that's been going on for a long, long time, but the complexity of putting all that together today is very different than it was in the past. And I've been through, this is my 4th transformation now, and certainly the one with the highest upside and actually the highest downside, all boiling down to trust.
Now, you're right about that. So how do we go down through, and if we're looking at it, you know, we're seeing a shift from generative AI that assists humans to agentic AI that acts on their behalf. Where do you see enterprises getting excited, and where do they start getting nervous? And here's the other thing, Chris, we're in this stage of infobesity. There's 178 zettabytes of data on this planet, and it's growing at about 69.6% per year. We're inundated with infobesity. How do we go down through and use these tools to help these enterprises get excited? And why, some of them are nervous, and is it because they don't understand, or because they don't know how to use the tools, or they're just overwhelmed?
Great question. It is a massive transformation. Again, the 4th that I've been through. And up to now, it's all about been generating content. Gen AI has been, getting you a better answer potentially, or an answer from a lot of different documentation. Agentic AI is all about acting on that data. So anything that's autonomous, automated, that's happening in the background on your behalf, you've got to make sure it's instrumented. You have to know what's going on. So you really have to have that transparency, instrumentation, monitoring, and alerting associated with that. So the great news is you can automate a lot of both deterministic as well as non-deterministic conclusions. But because of the non-deterministic ones, and you're not exactly sure what's going to happen, you have to implement guardrails. So you can get a lot done with a combination of generative AI leading into agentic AI. But if you don't have the guardrails and the transparency in place, you better not go down that path.
So when do you, I write about alignment. I've written a lot of articles about alignment and sentience and those kind of things. But at what point does autonomy change the trust equation entirely?
Oh, when you start implementing things that act, you have to know what it's acting on and how it's going to behave. And again, implement guardrails associated with that. Again, when you go back the last 30, 40 years or so, companies all the time were implementing guardrails, but they were deterministic guardrails for the most part, right? So you kind of knew what could happen, and you then implemented some kind of a solution associated with that. Here, you have to identify all the things that could go wrong and come up with a set of constraints associated with what could go wrong, and then act on that.
It's interesting because we're starting to work. So my company's got a development group inside of it. And we're an operational family office, but we have a development group. And we're starting to work with quantum computers and putting layered multi-agent LLMs, not just saying, 5 different ChatGPT agents, but multi-agent LLMs and we're, looking at the possibilities out there. And when you take the kind of things that we're doing today that are 100 million times faster than the fastest supercomputer, which means what would take 10,000 years is taking us 200 seconds. So what happens to trust when you're at that scale, right? And Chris, you said something that's striking. Are we beyond the level of human comprehension? Do we've hit the top of where we don't understand things?
You actually have to determine where is the human going to be in the loop. At this stage of the game, it would be silly to think that there won't be a human in the loop. So every company has to determine what their level of risk is going to be. It's the propensity to take risk and put that human in the loop. And often you don't have the choice, right? The regulators are telling you what it is you can and cannot do. So there's an act in the European Union called the EU AI Act that's forming a set of constraints. There's the NIST AI framework that's forming a set of constraints. And then there's the ISO 42001, which is like ISO 27001. The analogy there was for information security. So you have to now operate within the context of these constraints, particularly if you're a regulated body. And you've got internal audit, external audit, client audit, regulatory audits all coming down on you depending upon the industry that you're in, that you have to respond to. So you have to resist the urge to try to go too fast, or you'll make some major mistakes.
But do you think that we're going to, and I just came back, I was actually in Africa speaking 2 weeks ago in Nigeria to about 5,000 people. And then previous to that, I was in Europe. And, are we getting to a point where we're going to over-regulate ourselves out of the game? Like we over-regulate so much that we're not going to be competitive anymore. It's just going to put the guardrails up, and other countries will be so far ahead of us.
Yeah, I think that's a concern around the world. And often when you believe that something like that occurs, some innovation occurs that allows you to deal with that. A simple, for example, would be people who get audited. In the old days, when you were audited, you were searching for all this data to try to provide to the auditors to explain to them what it was you were doing so they could feel comfortable about how you were being audited. Today, you could bring a platform to bear, such as, for example, the one I manage today with Squirro, and you can process a lot of that unstructured data and deal with the auditors much faster than you could in the past. So we can use some of this technology to actually get through the audit process a lot faster than would otherwise be the case.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. And, when you're in the boardroom talking to CEOs, CIOs, and risk officers, what are they really concerned about today? What concerns do they raise? And is it just buzzwords, or do they know what they're talking about?
The concerns are, is it worth the money? And is it worth the risk? Really, those two things, right? So on the money side, it's, what proof of values, proof of concepts have they been able to substantiate such that it's worth continuing to scale and continuing to invest. And you've got many more stakeholders today that can say no to something than in the past, right? And there are people in the audit group, the internal audit, external audits coming down on you. The CFO, are we getting the ROI? The compliance, the legal teams, all these people are now involved in a decision to move forward. So again, you have to have that transparency that provides you with the ability to know what risk you're taking and be able to mitigate that risk with the guardrails and know that you can actually achieve the ROI. And the ROI is often these days, it's not just about cutting costs, it's about making better decisions. And making better decisions often is you arrive at a conclusion faster and it's a better conclusion. You have to be able to measure that in some way as well.
When I'm talking, last week I was with family offices, so I had 4 presentations to other family offices. And what I understood is that they're afraid, right? They don't know the capabilities of these tools. And they also don't know the power of the tools. And what happens if you don't use them? Nothing good, because I tell them that it's like you're going to be a dinosaur, and you know what happened to the dinosaurs? Nothing good. And so how do we go about having people get away from fear to understand how to harness these tools to be able to make their companies better, their lives better, to be able to help us to be able to make better decisions? How do we do that? Because, I remember a long time ago as a kid, we used to say knowledge replaces fear. Is it because they're just not knowledgeable?
Yeah, education is key. It's interesting I've learned a lot about marketing in the last year or so, and what I'm finding is that the transparency associated with what you're marketing is really important because you're actually educating people in the process. So a lot of the inbounds, let's say, that are coming to us are people who wanted education. That's the good news and the bad news. The bad news is we actually want them to buy something from us, but without that education, they're not going to move. So first, it's about education. Education comes in the form of demos often, or they build something in a proof of value or a proof of concept. And then again, once again, the transparency associated with the answers that are coming from these systems is very, very critical, and the auditability of that answer. It's back to what I said before about how you define trust. You got to have all those things in place. It's got to be scalable. It's got to be explainable. It's got to be robust, and it's got to be fair. The results.
One of the audience just asked a question, and they said, one of the first is a statement: guardrails are key. Restrict the loopholes as much as possible. And then John said, what happens when AI starts to replace the people who create the regulations?
Well, yeah, you've got to have a smarter person than that person, right? In what you develop in terms of the LLMs that you're using. Uh, the I read a book recently called Co-Intelligence. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the book. It's excellent, and talks about where's this all going, and maybe what you're describing is super intelligence, right? And will that actually be something that we all face it one day? I'm not really sure at this stage.
It's interesting because I went down and I had my stem cell treatment done. Uh, what happened is I started to work with the AI in an entirely different way, because what I understood is that the AI can actually teach us things. So remember, as a kid, you would have questions. A butterfly would fly. Well, how does a butterfly fly? And what happened is I started to use the AI, my multi-agent large language model, to be able to go down through, and anytime I'd come up with a question, to answer it. The capacity of my ability to be able to comprehend it went up. And as I'm also a psychologist, right? I didn't bench it, but I'd say it's 20% better than what it was. Well, 20% puts you at 2 standard deviations from the norm. And it's very interesting, because the human starts to develop in a strange way singularity with the system in a tightly coupled way. It's very, very interesting, actually. I didn't understand that. So she told me, she just wrote me and she said to me, okay, you've operated in some of the world's most regulated environments. And what does enterprise grade trust actually mean? And is that real, or is it just something we're hoping for? And how do we go down through, and this specifically she wants me to say in regards to generative and agentic AI.
Yeah, trust is the system works. So you have to have some kind of measurement associated with the system. Often you measure throughput in a system, and you measure availability in the system, and you measure the quality of the response in the system. So you have to believe that the system has those characteristics associated with it, right? And then when you throw more and more workload at the system, it actually scales for you as well, right? When you get an answer, do you have the ability to audit the answer? Like, where did that answer come from? And if you can't get a source and a lineage associated with where that answer came from, how could you possibly trust it, right? And then is the answer fair amongst a set of constraints, right? And those constraints might be, you're having to respond as an agent to a loan application, and did you actually answer that in a fair way as defined by your policies? All this is, again, it tends to be about the auditability, the robustness of the platform, right? And the predictability of how that platform will run when you throw different workloads at it down the road.
Now, it's interesting. By the way, so John, just from the audience, by the way, we have at any time up to 10,000 people that are watching the show. So one of the things, and John, appreciate it, but one of the things John said, he said, and I'm willing to bet the regulators are already using AI to create the regulations. And that's probably right, because you know something? We can think out of the box at an entirely different level with these tools.
Well, think about what the regulator has to try to do, right? And the auditor has to try to do. Imagine an external auditor coming in, knows what the regulations are, and has to audit you and come up with something that's also fair, right, and accurate. They're going to use AI tools to do that because of the level of complexity and sophistication they're dealing with today. Otherwise, they can't keep up.
Yeah, so if you look at it, Chris, what mistakes do startups make when they underestimate enterprise risk and governance requirements?
Yeah, they often try to go too fast. Startups face a set of cash constraints, right? So they want to implement something that satisfies the person that they're dealing with. Often there's some ROI associated with it. So they want to get to the ROI. And the ROI often isn't expressed in the context of meeting some regulatory obligation. That's some other stakeholder. So you've got to make sure you understand the full set of stakeholders before you commit your resources, because your resources are incredibly important, right? When you don't have a lot of cash on hand, for argument's sake. So make sure you have the compliance people on board, the CFO on board, the CTO on board, the CIO on board, and any other person that you think that's a stakeholder that could actually say no, right? And obviously you have to have these single decision maker, but often, and again, these days, it's much more complex than it was even 5 years ago in terms of getting a decision made.
The one thing, she wants us to talk about human in the loop versus human on the loop. So there's been a lot of debates around human in the loop versus human on the loop. From your own personal experience, Chris, what balance actually works at scale? And is it possible to really have balance?
Yeah. In the loop to me is you can stop the process from executing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was involved in building a trading system, automated trading system years ago. These were, you could say, expert systems in the old days, and they were making decisions on behalf of traders. But the human in the loop was the trader. So when the buy decision came up, right, the trader had to say, yes, I'm comfortable with that, or no, I'm not, or just don't do anything for now, right? Pause it for now. So that's a good example of a human in the loop where we want a person to make the actual decision versus they're actually monitoring what's going on, and they can stop things at some point, but not necessarily they're looking at every single decision that's being made by AI, right? Ultimately, it's a matter of two types of risk. One is, reputational regulatory risk. How high is that versus financial risk, right? So you have to have an understanding of how much money you're willing to lose, and it's like having a book of business. How much you're willing to put at stake and lose as a result of the decisions that are being made, or how much risk you're willing to take on a regulatory basis. Every company has a different take on that, right? About how much risk they want to take, and it may have something to do with how big or how well financed the company is as well.
Today you're focusing heavily on contextual intelligence. Why is context so critical to trust in AI-driven decisions? And that's story number one. And people, can you explain to the audience, because not every, in terms of context, What is context, and how does that build? How do you use that for trust?
Yeah, it's, we've built our business on semantic search and a chat, and then we ultimately got into agentic. So the context to me is the nature of the decision that you have to make based upon the response back from the system, right? So often, and what's happening now is we're automating a lot of jobs that are unnecessary, but we're making it harder and harder for people to make decisions because they have to have more and more technical depth because they have a context, whereas the machines don't really have the same context to make a decision. So you're now having to hire more and more specialists as you automate the jobs below that person that used to exist before, putting a premium on depth as opposed to breadth. So to me, I cast it in the context of jobs that you're going to hire for in the future versus jobs that you've automated already.
So what do you think? She wants me to ask you, is bad context more dangerous than bad data?
Yeah. Bad data, to me, data is the foundation, right?
Right.
So if your data is bad, don't do anything with AI. Just avoid it. You can use AI tools
Well,
actually
because nothing good's going
to
to happen
improve your data.
if you start using the bad data, especially on that GT3. Nothing good's going to happen.
You're going to make bad decisions. So get the data foundation right. The good news is you can use things like knowledge graphs and the classification of data to get your data right. Much more automated, better tools today than even existed 10 years ago.
Looking ahead 3 to 5 years, what do you think will separate the enterprises that successfully scale agentic AI from those that pull back?
Investment in data infrastructure, we were just talking about that a minute ago, and feeling highly confident about that. Your data is valid and reliable, two different characteristics associated with it. So get the foundation in place and make sure that the foundation is scalable. Right. And again, there are tools that you can do that are associated with that. And what you're doing is you're investing in ontology and taxonomy, and that's becoming a very popular thing to do right now. People have been trying to solve this problem a variety of ways manually for the last 40 years. But now you can actually do it in an automated way. So get the data foundation. Think also as a buyer and builder of technology. This is an ecosystem, right? And there's a combination of two ways you invest. You invest in platforms, and you invest in applications. So part of the investment in the platform is one that gets your data to be accurate and keeps it that way. And then you have a platform where you can build use cases that make that data come alive and or monetize it. Part of the way you make that data come alive is you're creating orchestrated, agentic, automated workflows associated with that. And then you build use cases on top of that to do a variety of things with the decisions that are made from those workflows. So build that up incrementally, and you can test it with use cases. Don't try to do everything at the same time in terms of the number of use cases. Get one use case to work on the basic foundation that you feel is reliable, scalable, and you're able to run it over time.
So, following on with that, well, what capabilities must leaders start to build today to be ready for this revolution that's taking place?
Yeah. Become knowledgeable about the platforms that are out there. Become knowledgeable about the tools that you need to build the right data infrastructure and make sure that that data infrastructure is reliable. Rethink the type of people that you're recruiting. That doesn't mean you don't hire people, for example, out of college, but you hire people with critical thinking skills, right? As opposed to a specific, for example, programming skill. Because some of those skills, when you hire people right out of college, are being automated by things like Claude Code, right? So you need a higher order of skill set or more depth associated with, how code is going to be built today. And if I'm managing my career, the analogy I would use is I'd want to become more of a conductor than the person that plays the violin, because people are going to become the orchestrators of agentic workflows in the future. That's where the premium is going to be
Yeah,
on the
agreed.
worker. Yeah,
How,
not
how to
the
use it to be able
digital.
how to use it to, our friend Sam Altman said, the first $1 billion company has one employee. it's already coming together. I mean, I can see that because we have 180 of those companies inside of GSD today. I already see it happen, and it's amazing. So for founders building AI companies and for enterprise leaders, Chris, deploying them, what's your single most important piece of advice when it comes to building and maintaining trust?
Provide transparency in your platform to your customers on a real-time basis, right? Don't stray away from that. Make that fundamental for what you do.
You know, we're coming up to the top of the show, Chris. If you want to stay on for a few minutes after we're done, if you want to chat a bit more, that would be great. So closing thoughts, and how do people get a hold of you?
I can be reached at chris.corrado@squirro.com. And I don't sleep much these days because life is too exciting. So I'm pretty responsive on a day-to-day basis.
No, that's great. And Chris, thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us one more time. And thanks to all of you for the millions of views and the thousands of subscribers that have come on to GSD to watch the show. We appreciate that. Stay happy, stay safe, and stay healthy. We will be back to you again soon with another exciting edition of GSD Presents Top Global Startups. And my name is Gary Fowler, your host. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Gary.